This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Man, it is finally set. We are finally here. The NBA Finals, live and direct. The Miami Heat back at it again for the fourth straight year, taking on the San Antonio Spurs. It's legend versus legacy. And we have got a full panel ready to represent for us to talk about probably one of the most highly anticipated rematch NBA Finals in recent history. I am so glad to have a ton of people ready to talk about two great teams, two great franchises ready to get it on as we partake ourselves into the NBA Finals. You know, I got to get it down with my right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado, Dime Mag contributor, representing one of the illest websites going on right now, shawsports.net. My man Warren Shaw, representing out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Get at me, my man. What's going on?
It's only fitting, man, that we save our best show of the year for the NBA Finals with the biggest panel that we've ever had, man. I'm so excited. Lots of great guests here, lots of talent. They just know they hoops. I can't wait to talk with these guys, man, and ladies. I can't wait to get into this, man. NBA Finals basketball, man. Let's get right to it, homie.
Most definitely. And so we're going to go ahead and get right into our introductions of the panel as we sit down and discuss this NBA Finals matchup between the Heat and the Spurs. First up with this, I got my man representing for the Bottom Line Sports Show on Wednesday nights on Google Plus at 9 p.m. You can also find him on Sirius XM NBA Radio on weekends at 10 a.m. I got my boy repping out of the BX, Mr. Gerald Brown. Holla at me, Mr. Brown. What is going down?
I'm in New Jersey, man. What you talk about, BX? I'm international, though. I'm Tri-State. I'm Tri-State. Glad to be on here with you guys, man.
All right. And then, of course, his co-host, co-partner, the lovely Chante Turner, representing the West Coast. You can catch her at Chante, the Twitter handle. She represents Tay Cheeks, the podcast, on Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The lovely Miss Chante Turner, holler back at me. What's going on, girl?
Hey, so happy to be here. Seems like a fun show. I'm here to represent all the non-Heat fans.
Gosh, you didn't even wait. No chill.
Boy, it's getting crazy out here. I love it. Okay, and then also we've got the Miami Heat writer. And listen, we're not trying to single you out, but I got my man Diego Quezada, who writes for Hot Hoops. He's an excellent writer. He's been doing his thing. You can catch him on the Twitter handle at Diego Heat NBA. What's going on, Diego?
It's all good. Thanks for having me on.
All right. And then, of course, last but not least, I got to roll out the red carpet with my man, the bartender representing out of Michigan, Craig Williams. You know, you can always find him. He's doing this thing on radio all day, every day. Holla at me, Mr. Bartender.
What's going on, guys? How we doing? And how did we get here to the rematch, baby?
Listen, what did LL Cool J say back in the day? Don't call it a comeback. I've been doing this thing for years. That's what it kind of feels like when you talk about the San Antonio Spurs. And then, I mean, what can you say? When you have the best player in the game in LeBron James, and we're going to start talking about all of this, legend, legacy talk with him and the comparisons of Michael Jordan. But when you have the best player in the game, nowadays when you talk about NBA players, there seems to be this expectation that LeBron James is supposed to be here. And look, he did it. 4 years in a row, the Miami Heat have put themselves in a position to play for an NBA title. This hasn't been done in quite some time, obviously. But when you look at the Miami Heat and you look at how this team is structured, it just makes you wonder sometimes, how does this team do it? Shaw, I'm going to start with you first because, it's the home team and you got home field advantage, so you can kind of roll out the red carpet in this. How impressed are you by what LeBron James has been able to do with this Miami Heat team, getting them to the finals 4 years in a row?
Well, I mean, let's not get it twisted, man. He's obviously the best in the game, but he's not doing it by himself, and I think he'd be the first person to tell you that. Despite whatever hate people may have for Mr. James, he's a very cerebral player. He respects the game. He respects the history of the game as well. It's not lost upon him what they've been able to do and as a unit. So he knows he needed Wade and Bosh, hence why he came to Miami to begin with, because he was unable to do it by himself in Cleveland. So what they've done here by being the first team in, 28, 30 years, I think, to reach 4 straight NBA finals is unprecedented, and he definitely deserves a salute to that. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it to my man Diego, who's obviously covering the Heat, and get his take on that same opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge that the Heat are actually in the Eastern Conference. Some call it the Leastern Conference. And they do have an easier path to the finals every single year. You look at a team like the Spurs, this was the first year that they've ever made it to 2 straight finals. And it's just because the West is so loaded. You have so many more teams. In the West, I bet probably the 8th-seeded Dallas Mavericks maybe could have beaten the Pacers in a 7-game series. You have every year below 500 teams make the playoffs in the East. So I think it's also, yes, what the Heat did is very impressive, and they did win 2 7-game series two years ago against Boston and then last year against the Pacers, but they are in the East, and they did have a little bit of an easier road, especially in those first 2 rounds when they were beating teams in 4 or 5 games.
Gerald, when you talk about this Miami Heat team and you looked at them, and I know you talked about it at length on your show, the Bottom Line Sports Show, are you impressed more by the fact that LeBron James carried this team literally on his back, knowing that he only had half of Dwayne Wade, and he didn't have the type of supporting cast that he had last year that put them in this position for them to be playing the San Antonio Spurs for a title once more?
I have to agree with everybody else. I kind of believe that in some regards, the road was really a very easy one for them. They faced a Charlotte Bobcats team that in game 1 they lose Al Jefferson and he plays hobbled. Then you turn around a Brooklyn Nets team that was very, very old, very methodical, that didn't want to challenge them up and down the court. And then we all know what happened with the Indiana Pacers. But the things that's been really interesting is that Dwayne Wade has been very healthy so far in these playoffs, and I think that might be a big difference come this Spurs.
All right, I got my man Bartender out here, man. Bartender, look, this Miami Heat team basically shot down anyone's aspirations about wanting anybody, to stop them from going to the finals. And we thought that this was going to be the year that the Indiana Pacers found a way to break through, and it was lined up that way, especially with them struggling so much. When you saw what the Miami Heat did to the Indiana Pacers, basically dismantling them in 6, were you basically looking at this and saying, uh-oh, here comes the Miami Heat again? Are they going to be that unstoppable force? Or did you walk away with maybe some doubts that they're not as invulnerable as everyone makes them seem to be?
Well, the bottom line is you can't be struggling in the first 2 rounds to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, by the time the Pacers got to the Heat, those legs just were not there. And the bottom line is the Heat was a better team. Look at it, despite the one game that LeBron had where he scored 7 points, I mean, they pretty much manhandled of the Pacers. The Pacers still need a star because in the playoffs, you need stars. I mean, that's how you win. And the bottom line is, as Jordan is still trying to figure his way out, they have established who the stars are on the Miami Heat. They try to go for 4 in a row and 3 championships in a row.
And then Chante, I know that everyone's trying to peg you out to be a non-Heat supporter, but when you evaluate
it's
this
the truth now.
When you evaluate this team, and we talk about it, we could throw statistics up there. I mean, in history, and you look at the lineage of great NBA teams, what LeBron was carrying. I mean, how impressed are you about this team? How do you feel about this Miami Heat team as far as should we be putting them in that conversation of great NBA teams within this 4-year window that they've had?
You know what? I have to say, in my opinion, no. Maybe after they beat the Spurs. The Spurs are playing great basketball. They're a better team than they were last season. Miami Heat should be crushing everybody. They had the easiest road to the NBA Finals. They have the best player in the land on their team, and they have a great supporting cast with Chris Bosh, D. Wade, and everybody else. So they should be beating everyone. They should have beat the Bobcats in 4. They should have beat the Pacers in 4 because the Pacers team has been unraveling since, before they made the playoffs. So we knew that team wasn't going to go far. We knew they weren't going to beat Miami, and Miami should have beat them. They should have swept them, and they didn't. The game that happened the other day, you just mentioned, Cal, that LeBron put the team on his back. Some days he does, but he's not consistent with it. He doesn't own it, I don't think, yet. We just saw the game the other day. Last seconds left. They were down, I think, by 2 or 3. He was right under the basket with the rebound or the pass. And instead of just dunking it on Hibbert, who would have fouled him anyway, he passed it out to Bosch, which was probably the play. But if you put the team on your back, you have to put that in your hands, and you've got to make that shot. So I'm not that impressed with LeBron and the Heat. I mean, we knew they were going to make it this far, and that's what they did. I want to see what they can do against this Spurs team, though.
All right, so go ahead and talk about that Spurs team. I mean, this is the second year in a row that the San Antonio Spurs are in a position to possibly win an NBA title. They had their opportunity last year, losing a Game 6 to the Miami Heat. They were within seconds of basically pulling out one of the bigger upsets when you look at how teams were composited in the favor of, well, the Miami Heat should beat an old, battered down, no country for old men style San Antonio Spurs team. But this Spurs team has proven to be a machine. And even when this year, when all of these other Western Conference teams got re-upped and reloaded, the San Antonio Spurs is the last team standing out of the Western Conference, and they did it quite impressively. And I think that they quashed a lot of doubters. So I'm going to start with you, Bartender, real quick. Give me your take about how impressed you were about what this San Antonio Spurs team has been through the course of this year and in the postseason.
You got to give it to Greg Popovich. He kept everybody under 29 minutes a game. He's got old legs on that team. He managed the minutes. He kept those guys healthy. We've seen Spurs with Tony Parker got out for a while, Manu Ginobili, and Tim Duncan. When it comes to playoff time, and Tony's hurt a little bit right now, but for the most part, you got a healthy team again, line up the NBA Finals. You know that they're within 4 minutes of winning it all. It'll be interesting to see what they're going to do this round as well.
All right, and Diego, like when you looked at how this Spurs team, I mean, listen, we talk about how this Western Conference Finals was just topsy-turvy between them and the Oklahoma City Thunder, blowouts on each other's home court. But then that game 6 was a more realistic, I guess, barometer to say, what do you do when a San Antonio Spurs team is being pushed by these athletic young guns of the Oklahoma City Thunder? And they held their ground. If you allow the Spurs team to hang around, they're going to find a way to probably beat this team. Does this help the San Antonio Spurs going into this NBA Finals in comparison to what they went through when they ran through the Memphis Grizzlies in 4 straight games and then wound up losing 7 to the Heat last year?
I think it does matter, but I wouldn't say that playing the Grizzlies last year really mattered. I mean, they had, I think it was a week off because the Heat series went the distance. And, you know, they were 28 seconds away from winning the championship. I think that this just proves that. Everyone said last year after the Pacers lost, the Spurs lost last year, that the Spurs are done, it's the end of an era. They've proven through the minutes and in the playoffs that they're still a team to contend with. And I do think that they are a little bit better than they were last year. But I think on the other side you have a healthy D. Wade, and I think that's something that is a very key part of this series that I hope we'll get into.
Chante, how impressed are you with the way that Greg Popovich was able to make adjustments in this Western Conference Finals against the Oklahoma City Thunder? A lot of people questioned Greg Popovich last year with regards to how he got probably outcoached by Erik Spoelstra in those final 2 games. And then he makes an adjustment where a lot of people question that this Spurs team cannot handle athletic teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder. Is the old Greg Popovich back where he is now cerebral in his thought process about how he wants to attack teams going into the postseason?
He's back, and he's better than ever. He might be, if he wins, he has to go down as the best coach ever, above Phil Jackson and whomever else. His management of minutes and players is ridiculous. Without that type of coach, I don't think the Spurs can make it. He's got an old team. They're slow, and it's amazing that they came out of the West against, you know, faster teams like OKC, athletic teams, the Trailblazers. I mean, and they didn't just win; they were killing those teams. So it's been really, really impressive. As Diego said earlier, you know, D. Wade is healthy for Miami, but you know the Spurs have the deepest bench I've ever seen, and in this season, Manu Ginobili is healthy. So this only helps Coach Pop, you know, in his endeavors. I think this is his to win.
most definitely. And so, Gerald, like, we often talk about how, the San Antonio Spurs, being that well-oiled machine, putting themselves in this moment, is the revenge really that motivation, or is the fact that they have an opportunity to do something pretty legendary? Like, we often talk about the big three, and for some reason, we don't seem to be putting the San Antonio Spurs in that talk or that conversation until now. I mean, now we literally should be talking about this big three has been there a lot longer before we were talking about Bosh, Wade, and LeBron, or we were talking about, the days of Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce. These guys, you could probably make the argument, was almost that original big three around our generation, around our era. And so now we have to be giving them their props because they transcended into that new generation where people are looking at LeBron James as being the man. We still forget that the man is still Tim Duncan, apparently, for playing for 20 years. He's like the Derek Jeter of our generation in the NBA.
I agree with you. I mean, he's done some phenomenal things, and I think that this is a testament to great, great selections and great picks by a front office, starting with R.C. Buford, the general manager, all the way down to a guy like Popovich. But, I mean, you think about the run that they have had in terms of the last 20 to 25-plus years. It started with, really, David Robinson, and then they followed that up with a guy like Tim Duncan. And the key thing in both of those individuals is pretty much their sort of manageable superstars, if you will, guys that really have no ego whatsoever. And those were the type of guys that were able to set the table. And then they also drafted very well. But I want to go back to one thing that, keep in mind this way. You go back to certain moments in the course of the playoffs. I mean, I think about the situation where Atlanta had Indiana on the ropes. You had a situation where if DeJuan Blair doesn't get kicked out of that game and he misses the following game for the Dallas Mavericks, maybe they would have had an opportunity to beat the San Antonio Spurs. The same could be said about the Oklahoma City Spurs series, where in I think it was game 5, where you had a game 5 where Greg Popovich made a great decision in terms of starting Matt Bonner as well as putting Kawhi Leonard or Russell Westbrook, and thus forcing the situation where having Ibaka move away from the basket. And thus that was the turning point, because inevitably the way things were shaping up with Ibaka's return, headed back to the NBA Finals, and that being the Oklahoma City Thunder. But kudos to Greg Popovich. And I think that I think he has more of the motivation more than ever, because there were some questionable decisions he decided to make in that series in terms of last year's NBA Finals, going with Danny Green a little bit longer than normal over a guy like Manu Ginobili, I thought was really telling. So in that case, he might have been outcoached by Erik Spoelstra, but you got to give it to Greg Popovich and the San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah, well, the Spurs continue to impress and I think amaze everybody, through their longevity. And again, because Popovich is a guy who can make adjustments on the fly. He was a little bit stubborn, I think, in the Western Conference Series. He let 2 games, he more or less let them lose before he decided he was going to make an adjustment. But I think he found something at the end of Game 4 when they were getting blown out. He ran his reserves basically out there and benched his starters, and that's what made him make that adjustment for Game 5. So, that's something that I'm going to be interested to see, definitely, and I know we're going to talk into that a little bit, in terms of what the matchups are going to be, who's going to start for both of these two teams as we move forward. One more question I want to pose before we move along is, do you all think that really, there is this disdain between the Spurs and the Heat? Like Tim Duncan said at the end of the Western Conference Finals, he's like, well, I'm glad it's them. And then LeBron comes out earlier in the week and says, well, you know what, I know they don't like us and all that. I don't really think that hate is there like that, but I was wondering if you kind of felt that, if this is fabricated or if this is a real thing. Chante, why don't you go ahead and jump in on that one?
No, I think it's fabricated. I don't think there's any hate. It's the Spurs. Come on now. They're the nicest guys in the league. I think it's more of we're glad it's them. We want to play the best. We want to beat the champions. They want to win the championship in that fashion. I think it was more of a rematch type of we want to get back at you thing. No hate.
Diego, what do you think about it?
I actually agree with Chante again on this. I think last year in the finals was I think it was one of the only finals in which there was no technical foul and no flagrant foul on any player on any team. in that entire 7-game series. And you take it back to Game 7. After that very close Game 7, Greg Popovich, the first thing that he does is he goes over and he hugs and he kisses the two Heat stars. I think there's nothing but respect among these two franchises, and I think, like Chante said, it's just a matter of saying you want to beat the best to be the best on the part of the Spurs.
So, Craig, is this real or fabricated?
It's real. It's real. There's no doubt about it. Like you guys said, it's one of those things where, I mean, they remember that feeling that they gave one away, how that went right into that Game 7, and they weren't even the same team. You could tell they were defeated even before that tip went up. So this is their time for retribution. And don't forget, 5 rings for Tim Duncan. That's huge. He thinks about his legacy every day, and these guys have played more minutes with Manu and Tony Parker than any other 3 in NBA playoff history. That's huge. They want to get one more ring before they break it up.
And Gerald, my dude, what do you think? This real or fabricated beef?
It's totally fabricated. I mean, think about it this way. We got 5 days off before the finals started. You got to have something to talk about. I mean, it's sort of boosted more. Adam Silver, look, we're not talking about Donald Sterling and the Clippers, so the league will run with this. All that. There's nothing there. I mean, we do know that these are the 2 best teams in all of the NBA. And in regards to what the bartender was saying about Tim Duncan, he gets his 5th ring. I think you could probably start the argument of saying that, you know what, on the NBA sort of Mount Rushmore, you could probably start knocking off a guy like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Tim Duncan. Wow. That's right. 5 rings. Yes, go ahead. That's right. That's right. I said it.
Magic is 5.
Magic and Bird. Magic has 5 too, but also understand this: Tim Duncan has played longer, and even when Tim was dealing with the knee injuries, he still was averaging a double.
Timmy can't dunk Magic off. I can't touch that one. I don't know what you're talking about. You're talking crazy.
He's a Laker. I forget it's a Laker. I'm sorry, but still in all, the argument still needs to be made.
You tuned to the Baseline. Cali, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA Finals preview, panel discussion. We got a roundtable. I mean, this is like, I kind of feel like we're in Camelot, and I got the illest knights around me discussing probably one of the more exciting NBA Finals rematches in recent history. I'm not going to touch that part of the knocking off Mount Rushmore with Tim Duncan, but I will chime in on this point that I kind of lean a little bit towards Bartender and with you guys a little bit in that I think there is some beef, but it's probably going to be the nicest that you'll ever see. Let's take something into consideration. We were talking about LeBron James first playing against the San Antonio Spurs last year. We needed to latch on to what's the significance of LeBron James getting this second NBA championship by beating the San Antonio Spurs, and we had to say, oh, well, yeah, he's beating Tim Duncan, and Tim Duncan is one of the few generational players that are still standing. The only other person that you can have this conversation with is Kobe Bryant, and unfortunately, Kobe Bryant has been hurt, and his team has just definitely not been a Lakers team over the last few seasons for us to even think about whether or not that'll ever happen. So the fact that the San Antonio Spurs are back again one more year, now to me, I think it heightens the idea that Tim Duncan's won one on LeBron James and LeBron James has won one. So this is kind of like that rubber match of of 2 teams destined to go at it. It's just that they're not the type of guys that like to talk smack like Isaiah Thomas and Magic Johnson did, or like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson did. You're not going to see a documentary on NBA TV about how 2 of these guys really hated each other. LeBron James would be the nicest guy to really not like you on the basketball court. Unless Tim Duncan suddenly turns into Lance Stevenson, I don't see it being that type of heated rivalry. But I will say that I think that there is a genuine rivalry now that we've got 2 franchises, both winning championships, off of 2 of the best players in their generation or in their timeline. So I think it'll be very interesting. Now going into this, that you're finally hearing Tim Duncan, the most quietest person in the NBA, suddenly now talking about, we needed to be here, we are finally here, and this is finally going to happen. So maybe I'm crazy, but I expect this to be a slugfest between these two teams. So let's go ahead and talk about the matchup. Heat versus the Spurs. So I'm going to start with you, Diego.
Mm-hmm.
You ready? Here we go.
Yeah.
What is it that you're looking for when you see this matchup between the Spurs and the Heat? What is so different between these two teams that you know is definitely not going to happen come this time around when these two face each other later on this week?
So I think the key for the matchup is the fact that, and you saw this in last year's finals, is that the Spurs are willing to concede the mid-range jumper. LeBron and Wade won Game 7 because they made those shots. Now, that's a risk that Pop is willing to go with. He's also going to give up the three-point shot on whoever is guarding Wade. Now, Wade did break out his three-point shot a few times in that conference finals. I don't know if he'll continue taking a shot, but he did make a few threes in that conference final. He usually never even looks at that point. But I think the key matchup is how the Heat will be defended by the Spurs in terms of that mid-range and three-point range shooting. You have a situation now in which the Heat do have Rashard Lewis, who did come around, made a lot of threes in games 5 and 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, what happens with the Spurs? Do they continue starting two bigs? Do they bring in Matt Bonner into the starting lineup like they did in the conference finals? And then on the other side, I think the question is, how do the Heat play the pick and roll? In Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals last year, the Pacers really hurt the Heat because when the Heat trapped, you just had David West slip the screen, and then he had that 4-on-3 situation in which he had a smaller guy on him and he had options to pass out to the corner. Now, do the Heat trap pick and rolls hard with Tony Parker, or do they keep the big man onto the screener and then try to let Tony Parker beat them with the mid-range shot? I think that's the thing, is how the teams play on defense and how both teams respond to that.
Gerald, let me ask you this question real quick. When you look at, and it's a pretty interesting comment, because now we're talking about Tony Parker, who suffered an ankle injury towards the end of the Western Conference Finals. And listen, he is going to be responsible for either taking possibly Dwayne Wade, maybe because of his height as a guard, or possibly just they're going, Popovich might look to just stick him with Mario Chalmers. But when you look at this team now, as the way that the Spurs are constructed, do they have the horses to keep up with that veteran athleticism with the Miami Heat this time around?
I think it's going to be really interesting because, I mean, keep in mind, last year in the matchup, we were all under the impression that, with Dwayne Wade really being hobbled, he would be sort of, quote-unquote, the weak link. And you had guys like, Mike Miller played a pivotal role, Ray Allen obviously hitting that big shot. But now the sort of tables have been turned because you have a guy like Tony Parker who is hobbled, and trust and believe that they are going to really be able to test, Tony Parker's health. And the question will be is, as great as guys like Patty Mills has looked for them in the regular season, even so the playoffs, it's a different story when you come to this point in time of the finals. The bright lights on. Can they be able to step up? So it's going to be really interesting. Could it be a possible situation where I don't think that they will be able to move a lot of people around? You're probably going to see Kawhi Leonard guarding LeBron James, and then it's going to be a situation where Danny Green is probably going to have to guard Dwayne Wade. But it's just going to be really interesting to see how things go. But that could be a crucial situation in terms of Tony Parker's health and how effective he will be this time around, and who will be able to step up for the Spurs.
Most definitely. So, real quick, bartender, let me ask you this question real quick, okay? This year we saw Kawhi Leonard just jump out the woodworks in Game 6, basically looking like that total package player that I think everybody is just salivating, waiting to see, and maybe he could be, quote-unquote, that X factor. Is this going to be more of the series where he expends himself more defensively than he normally would because it's the Miami Heat? Or can we actually see that kind of offensive explosiveness that we think he's capable of playing against the Miami Heat team that's clearly not as structured as they were last year?
Well, the one thing is Kawhi Leonard, like I said, Game 6, he had a really coming out party. Are we going to see more one-on-one with him against LeBron? Are they going to do like they did last year? What the Spurs did last year? We're not going to let you drive the lane. We're going to let you take jump shots all game. And that's how they kind of neutralize, to a certain extent, LeBron. What is the move and the counter move against Spoelstra and Popovich? Well, we saw how Popovich and the Spurs got here. They saw the last series what Serge Ibaka was doing and said, okay, we're going to make it so you never see Thiago Splitter and Tim Duncan on the court at the same time, which neutralized what Serge Ibaka is. So in this series, the move, counter move between the two coaches, are we going to see more make you guys rely on Dwayne Wade to do more scoring? Who's going to be a playmaker? The bench is going to be huge in this. It's really going to come down to the coaching, and really going to be the first couple games what the chess match is going to go on between the coaching staffs.
Chante, Bartender brings up a really good point, and I know you had mentioned this earlier during the podcast with regards to how Greg Popovich is back. He's on his uptick as far as being that great coach that I think the Spurs truly need. On the flip side of it, we also look at Erik Spoelstra, and Erik Spoelstra, I think, still has got that chip on his shoulder that he deserves to be respected. I mean, the guy has got 2 NBA titles. And here's something pretty interesting as well, and I don't know if whether or not people recognize this, but when you look at Greg Popovich and Erik Spoelstra, they represent really the only 2 franchises that has not seen a change in their coaching, as far as coaching staff goes, during the time that we're over the last, I want to say, 7-8 years. Erik Spoelstra came in. He hasn't been switched out prior to him getting, Pat Riley picking up LeBron James and Chris Bosh. Greg Popovich has been there. Every other team in the NBA has gone through some type of head coaching change. And so now we're at this particular point. And if for whatever reason, while we still talk about the superstars, we still keep forgetting that coaching is still going to be the key. Like, who is going to make that checkmate move to put their team over the top?
I completely agree with what the bartender was saying. I think this is going to go down to the matchup of the coaches. It's like the battle of the coaches is what we're going to see. Both teams have key players at key positions. They're probably going to have, Mario Chalmers on Tony Parker, but can he really stop Tony Parker? He's already gone past Lillard and Westbrook, so he's battle-tested already. Kawhi has his work cut out for him with LeBron, but he was on KD, so I think he's battle-tested as well. And I think, Coach Pop will give him one job, and he'll have to shut LeBron down, and I think he'll do the best he can do. Every player is sort of matched up well. Bosh and Timmy. I think it's really going to come down to the coaching in a 6 or 7 game series. So I got to agree with most of what you guys are saying. As far as the perimeter players, which Diego pointed out, very true. But on the flip side, Miami can shoot from the perimeter. The Spurs can do the same thing. They've got some shooters there. We mentioned that the bench was long. Danny Green, when he's hot, he's hot. Bellinelli, didn't he win the 3-point contest? When he's hot, he's good. So both teams sort of have, the same type of weapons.
Yeah. If I may, I got to disagree with Chante. I think that
of course
clearly,
you do. You disagree with me.
I got to give him a hard time. I think that if you look at it in terms of Danny Green versus Dwayne Wade, obviously you got to go with Dwayne Wade. And in regards to, when will, a guy like Popovich, will he be loyal to a guy like, goodness, his name is escaping me right now, but if you would pull a guy like Bellinelli into the equation, will Ginobili play more of a point guard slot in terms of sliding over if Parker's not 100%? So it will be interesting. And Cal, you brought up a great point in terms of Erik Spoelstra. He's perhaps one of these coaches that will go down, he's perhaps one of the greatest coaches to be overlooked, because as much as people give the credit to the Miami Heat, less credit is given to him, because everybody will say, well, he's had LeBron James, and it's so funny because technically he outcoached Greg Popovich to win that championship.
The Spurs did a great job of themselves this all season too, guys, because we did see right in the series, Manu Ginobili It's not the same player, and it really affected the Spurs and how they played in the finals. This year, you have a Bellinelli, where if Manu is not Manu, Bellinelli can kind of fill in that role. So they've instituted that three-guard position, which Manu plays at a high level.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in real quick because I have, a lot is being said right here, and I just, I think Parker's health is obviously key for the Spurs. And if he can't go, then that puts an immense amount of pressure on a guy like Ginobili, who did not have a great NBA Finals last year. So then you have to live by Ginobili or die by Ginobili. Are you going to see the good Ginobili that we've seen most of these playoffs, or are we going to see the one that struggled mightily against the Miami Heat pressure last season in the NBA Finals, where he averaged roughly 11 points and turned the ball over countless times in Game 6 and Game 7, which was a huge problem for them. One other thing, too, I want to discuss, too, is, again, what you guys have alluded to, is the matchup. So Miami has been amazing to me in this regard, where they've continued to switch their starting lineup, whether that's Wade being out or whether they keep switching their power forward position. Now Rashard started to kind of neutralize the Indiana bigs. Is Rashard now going to be the full-time power forward starting in the finals, or does he go back to a UD? Does he go back to a Shane Battier? And then in turn, Popovich, what does he do? Because I think Splitter has proven that he's useless against Miami. They can't play him and Duncan at the same time. So now a guy like Boris Diaw becomes immensely important for them, and he emerged over the last two games of that series versus Oklahoma City Thunder. So my question to you, Diego, is really, how has Miami been able to be as consistent, changing the lineup as much as they have, and do you think Rashard is going to be the answer for the starter as a starter in the NBA Finals?
So to answer your first question, that power forward spot, even when UD was starting, he was really only playing for the first few minutes of the first and third quarters and then not really playing. So the Heat are not really losing that much. And if you notice, UD was actually the only Heat player in the playoffs who had a negative plus-minus for the playoffs. So when he was on the court, that's how the Heat had all those slow starts, because for the most part, that 15-foot jumper that he had has pretty much vanished from his repertoire. He doesn't really have anything else except for if he dives to the basket and gets a layup. So I think, when you have that power forward spot, that's the spot that they've used for Shane Battier. Even Mike Miller, he was inserted into the starting lineup in the middle of the finals last year because he was really hot from three. And so I think, Lewis will start at the power forward spot in the finals. I think that'll be something that they'll want to do because he can stretch the floor, because he can stand in places that UD and Chris Anderson can't stand, and move his guy out to those spots to create wider driving lanes. But I do think that you'll see the Heat go very small in this series. I think there are going to be a lot of times, I think especially in the crunch time minutes, you'll see the Heat go with a lineup of the big three and then Mario Chalmers and Ray Allen, because then you have all three-point shooters. In fact, you could even say that the worst three-point shooter in that lineup is your shooting guard, Wade. But I think that's the lineup that I think you'll see closing out games. And I think the fact that you have as your power forward, the best player in the game, maybe is going to force Pop to make a move. Maybe they don't play Boris Diaw. Maybe they're going to have to adjust to the Heat instead of vice versa. So I think you should expect the Heat to go small. Maybe we will see the Heat go with some of the Bosh, Birdman lineups, but I think for the most part, you will see the Heat go small by and large.
Diego is scaring me right now. If the Spurs lose by a Ray Allen three-pointer, I'll die.
Oh.
He's gonna be on the court, and you noticed in that Pacers series, David West had to chase him around. Do the Spurs want to have a bigger player chase Ray Allen around the court? It didn't work out for David West. And that's the thing that you can do when you go small.
So, Gerald, let me ask you real quick. Do you think San Antonio should, in turn, go small and play a guy like Diaw, who's even a little bit lumbering himself? Everyone always kind of makes jokes about his weight, but he gave the Spurs their best chance in the Oklahoma City series because he was able to kind of go and post up some of the smaller guys. But if a Rashard Lewis is out there, that's not exactly somebody who Diaw might be able to post up. So what do you think San Antonio should do if Miami does go small?
Well, first and foremost, I think that really, I have to disagree with the instead of Rashard Lewis in this series because of the size that the Spurs can throw at you. We might see a guy like Greg Oden. Finally, you see a guy like him implemented into the sort of rotation. and thus perhaps at stretches that you the Spurs decide to go Splitter and Duncan, which they initially start off. Perhaps you could see a guy like Greg Oden coming in and playing minutes, and then at certain points in time, I just maybe or at times spend a little time on LeBron, just another look to give him. But I do see that this is why you got Greg Oden. This is what Greg Oden was brought in for the Indiana series, and then whoever you met in the West. And maybe this would be a great opportunity to see exactly what happened.
I would disagree a little bit, only because if we were going to see Greg Oden, we would have seen him take your series.
Yes.
But other than him, I think it's all hands on deck. Again, this is a championship. You may be seeing some guys that, like Udonis Haslam, that has been there before but hasn't played that big of a role. I think Greg Oden is going to be there. I think everybody else pretty much is going to be ready to play.
All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Kylie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. We got a full panel discussion going on with the NBA Finals preview. Got our girl Chante Turner. Got our man Craig the Bartender Williams. I got my man Diego Quezada. My man Gerald Brown. You know, and this is what it comes down to. We're talking about two great teams basically going at it. Last year it took 7 games for the Miami Heat to win themselves their second straight NBA title at the expense of really a team in the Spurs that just could not believe that they were seconds away from getting, you know, Tim Duncan's 5th NBA title. And so let's get right into this. Chante, you know, when you look at this series, how it should play out, the way it needs to play itself out, who do you have going on? Quite clearly, I'm not trying to label you being a Heat hater, but since there's only one team playing the Miami Heat in this series, clearly you're looking at the Spurs to go all the way, right?
Oh, for sure. You got to look at the numbers, man. Listen, the numbers are not lying to you. Who's the better team? The Spurs. Who has the better coach? The Spurs. Who has the better season? Spurs. Who can win? Who wins the most away games? The Spurs. I mean, they have it all, and it's their time to win. It slipped through their fingers last season, and I don't think they're going to let it happen again. I got the Spurs in 6.
How is Greg Popovich such a better coach?
Nobody. Who would argue that, Gerald? You didn't take your medication today. Who would argue that? Of course Popovich is a better coach than Spoelstra. Come on.
He went to 4 straight finals.
Okay, he's got the best player in the league. And the refs don't even let people touch LeBron. He's a crybaby. Come on.
You said that they have an exceptional team.
Listen. You can't even argue that. Coach Pop is better than Spoelstra. That's not even saying anything bad about Erik Spoelstra. He's a good coach. He's not better than Pop.
Last year for his 3rd championship.
He's not better coaching Pop. If he was coaching those Spurs, they wouldn't be in the finals.
Okay. Well, Gerald, since you jumped in, man, why don't you go ahead and give us your finals prediction here, bro?
You know what? I'm arguing. You know, it's going to be a great series. I do expect it to be a situation where, Warren, can I still have I lost my sort of title to be able to make predictions? So what is it? One of those situations where whatever I predict, you do it.
My friend, you still have a little bit of, you know what I'm saying? You still got a little bit of a little bit. You know what I'm saying? We haven't rescinded your rights just yet. Just don't make anything as outlandish as saying this, the Miami Heat re-signed Damian Lillard, and because of that, the Miami Heat suddenly is going to win this NBA championship. You can't do that, bro.
I'm gonna say the Miami Heat in 6 games. I think the Tony Parker injury will be something that, again, depending on what type of adjustments, this is going to be a chess match. It's not going to be checkers. It's going to be a chess match. And I'm thinking that right now, with a healthy Dwayne Wade, Miami Heat in 6. LeBron, the greatest.
This guy.
Turn his mic off.
Bartender, can you serve him up some? Can you serve it up? Let me know how you really feel, my man.
Well, you know, it's going to be a big matchup like everybody's talking about. If Tim Duncan's able to get that feed, you know, it's going to be in the LeBron era. There's something to be said for a guy that has done over and above what Jordan has. Jordan never went to 4 finals in a row. I mean, 5 and 8 is what LeBron is at right now. If Tim Duncan get it done, it's still going to be in LeBron era, and I just don't see it. I'm gonna say in 7, it'll be the Heat.
Whoa! All right. Bartender says Heat in 7. Diego?
I have the Heat in 6. I think the Heat will probably lose game 1, and then you're going to try to win game 2. But I've always thought of the Heat as a very good counter-punching team. And what I mean by that is that they always play well when their backs are against the wall. So obviously you don't like it as a fan because you want to see your team play well all the time. But I think, as has been the case throughout this Big Three era, the Heat always respond when their backs are against that wall. And I think you'll see the Heat respond again. And it's so great to see a championship team play desperately when they're down in the fourth quarter. I've loved every minute of watching this playoffs. So I have the Heat in 6. I think they'll close it out on their home court.
Well,
hey guys, I just want to add one thing. Just one thing. LeBron cuts the Nets down, and he says sayonara to Miami and go out on a winning note with the Miami Heat.
What? Hey, let me add one thing. I hope that LeBron gets the ball again in the final seconds and throws it out to somebody else to make a shot and they miss.
Oh, man.
Hey,
Chante!
Repeat.
Were you saying that when he kicked it out to Bosch and he made that 3 against the Nets in Game 4?
Absolutely.
The pass is good. When it goes in, the pass is good.
I know Bosch. I know that shot for him is normally money. I know that was probably the play that Jay drew up, but in the final second, you are the man on that team. That's your team. This is your league. I mean, you're under the basket. How you under the basket and you don't go for a dunk? You got Hibbert on you. That would have been an air one.
You got to understand, guys. I know Chante somewhat basketball, but you can tell right now that she was not passing the ball at all. So she's under Kobe Bryant mentality. Is that it's every shot I take is a good shot. Okay.
No way MJ is giving that ball up. I hope LeBron's wife made him sleep on the couch that night. That was ridiculous.
Oh man, that's a facilitator.
Steve Kerr and John Paxson have both got that big shot from Michael Jeffrey Jordan.
Thank you, bartender.
And MJ probably had the entire team on him, though.
Oh, please. There she goes. You notice, and that's why the whole situation, the criticism of Kobe Bryant, why the Lakers won't go anywhere, let alone if anybody's smart enough to go there and play with him. Because of that sort of mentality. Chante don't know any defense. You don't know. What is that?
King Mamba. What are you talking about?
That is.
Oh, man, this is awesome. So, I think more than anything, the one thing that we have to look at really is that big question. We've seen different sides of LeBron James through the years, and there's no question that LeBron James has matured for us to have this kind of conversation. We were saying probably 4 or 5 years ago that LeBron James was afraid to take the shot, and then we see situations through the course of the year where he's upset that Erik Spoelstra is setting up plays where the ball is not entirely in his hands, or if a teammate doesn't get him the ball, he takes it personally. I'm hoping to see that LeBron James in this series, and I think if there's one team in the Western Conference that's going to force him to feel another way, to play another way, it's going to be the San Antonio Spurs, because this is a team that plays with waves of players that just really know how to compete, and that's part of the Popovich way. With that being said, it's really difficult for me to gauge on how great the Miami Heat team can truly be against the San Antonio Spurs team. I've seen this San Antonio Spurs team where if they're clicking on all cylinders, they are literally unstoppable. And I think more times than many, when you look at what they've had to go through this year in the Western Conference, I think that they're better seasoned. I think they're better prepared. The only thing that I think would have been questioned is the health of Tony Parker and tired legs. And I just don't see that being the case. They can get physical if they want to. They can play finesse if they want to. They can shoot the perimeter, or they can pound it inside. Look, last year, Tim Duncan was basically the MVP of that team, where throughout most of the season, everybody was wondering if Tim Duncan has any legs left to be playing in that NBA Finals. And then you look at the performances that he put on in those last few games, even if it was just him and himself, I think that he just has a better supporting cast, and I think that they realize that this is about as good an opportunity as they will ever get given where they are and the situation that the Western Conference presents itself, I think they probably will play with a little bit more desperation. And to Diego's point, if we're talking about the Miami Heat playing with their backs against the wall, we got to say the same thing about the San Antonio Spurs. You know, it's kind of funny. We talk about the San Antonio Spurs. We talk about how Greg Popovich, I don't think, has ever really gotten that kind of respect. Remember, he went through a litany of years where he was the stepping child to the Los Angeles Lakers when they had Shaq and Kobe. And I think that he's really been trying, in his own little way, trying to etch out where he stands out amongst those teams that had those that were basically obstacles in his past to win an NBA championship, because we expected the San Antonio Spurs team to be there all the time, every time. And this is probably going to be it. So when we're talking about the big three, this could be where that's their swan song, so to speak. So I'm looking at the Spurs probably to do this in 7. I think that if the Heat are going to win it, they have to win it in 5 or less. Other than that, I think it's going to be a Spurs move where they just basically knock out, and then we're only talking about 2 out of 4 for LeBron James, and then we'll find another reason to start hating on the big king.
Well, I'm a little concerned. I'm going to give my final prediction here as well. I'm concerned for San Antonio, mainly for the health of Parker. If he's really not going to be 100%, I don't know how they're going to do this. I think Duncan needs to dominate, and I think he's going to have to be that throwback guy where he's roughly 25 and 12 a game, something like that, to dominate Bosh and whoever they put out there on him. And they are going to need to see the good Ginobili if they really have a chance. What also worries me is that when you have the 2 best players on the court, when you have LeBron and Wade, I'll kind of take that over the precision basketball over the Spurs, because LeBron and Wade can just go and do things that other guys can't when it comes down to crunch time. And both of those guys have proven to be clutch. Whether you think LeBron should be passing those last shots or he shouldn't be, he makes the right basketball decision. I think that's what's going to push Miami over the top. 3-point shooting is going to be huge in this series as well. I think Miami has the edge in that. I don't like it, but I'm going to pick Miami in 6. I think it's going to be a great, very, very competitive series, just like it was last year. But I just go with the leadership of Wade and LeBron. I think they understand what they have a chance to do here and getting a 3-peat, and I think they get it done in 6 games versus San Antonio Spurs.
Wow, so there you have it. Everybody has pretty much chimed in, and it's pretty much just a consensus where it's the Miami Heat basically working on that 3-peat and putting themselves in the same conversation of the Los Angeles Lakers and the old Boston Celtics back in the day and stuff. And listen, to me, I wouldn't disagree with anybody. I probably would disagree with maybe the amount of games, because I just really feel like if the Miami Heat are going to beat the San Antonio Spurs team, they need to beat them. And you just cannot give a Spurs team an inkling of hope, so to speak. It'll be interesting how Game 1 really sets the tone, because last year we thought it was just an admiration that the Spurs did what they did to the Heat, but then we really started buying into it when we started seeing dominating performances from guys we didn't expect to see giving those type of performances. And I think that the Spurs there's nothing different than what they're capable of doing. So it'll be interesting to see who inspires who to play that type of level of basketball, because I think that's what's going to be needed. Both of them are going to bring out the best of each other. Bartender, my man, what is going on with you these days? Where can people catch you doing your thing?
You can check me out as I'm doing my podcast with my buddy Maximus, the MaximusShow.com, baby.
All right. And Diego, anything interesting on that are going to be setting on the Miami Sun? Are you going to be a full tilt dropping the insight on Hot Hoops with regards to coverage of the Heat and the NBA Finals?
Yes, look for total, complete coverage of the NBA Finals. I will be writing the recap to Game 4, and so we've got a lot of good stuff there from all angles, whether it's on-court, off-court, with the talk about the beef. So just go to hothoops.com to find everything about the Heat, and if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's @DiegoHeatNBA.
Most definitely. Big GB.
Yes.
Yeah, man. Listen, unfortunately, we ain't got any other teams for you to make some outlandish predictions here, but I'm anticipating we're going to have you on more oftentimes than not, obviously. But let us know what's going down with the Bottom Line Sports Show these days, my man.
Oh, man, we got Tribe Called Quest, Fife Dog joining us tomorrow, Derek Anderson, former NBA player. Then on Saturday, Sirius XM at channel 217. we'll have Damari Carroll on, and I'll probably have Charles Oakley on as well on Saturday and Sunday, starting at 10 a.m.
That's what I'm talking about. And Big Shaw, of course, my man can't just be on the microphone all the time just talking with me. I mean, that would just be ridiculous. So what's going down with you, my man?
Man, I'm sad. I would like to be on the show with Gerald tomorrow. I got to work. He got Fife from Tribe on there. That's what's up, man.
We finally got him on, man. He got his equipment up to par, so we looking forward to having Fife for it.
That's what's up. I'll definitely be tuned into that, even if I am at work, man. Definitely checking that out. But yeah, man. I mean, one more thing I want to say about the series. I even saw it on PTI. I'm not even going to say I think those guys talked about it. I wouldn't be surprised if either team won the series. I mean, and in any amount of games, these are the two best teams in the league right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if either one won the series. But we obviously have all made our predictions, but I think things can definitely go either way. But definitely, I'll be writing pretty much doing recaps of each game and looking for some insight from both sides of the spectrum on ShawSports.net. Same thing at my Twitter handle, ShawSportsNBA. I'll definitely be hitting things up, interacting with you guys. Want to interact with my esteemed panel right here now with two, Bartender, Gerald, Diego, CL, we always get it in. And Chante's always talking some mad stuff on Twitter as well. She had to bounce out, but definitely, man, let's keep this conversation going, man. NBA Finals start on Thursday. Really appreciate having all of you guys on. You guys are all professionals in your own right, and I really appreciate what you've been able to bring to the Baseline Show this evening, man. So I salute you all, and can't wait to work with you guys again.
Yeah, man. Listen, I really appreciate all of our panelists, Craig the Bartender, our girl Chante Turner, my man Diego Quezada, my man GB from Bottom Line Sports Show, everybody that's come on. We all are waiting hand and foot, ready to start watching probably one of the better NBA Finals that's going on this year. The Heat and the Spurs, NBA Finals, man. You see how we do. We appreciate everyone listening to us here on the Baseline. You know how to get at us at NBA_the Baseline. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at ShawSportsNBA, or get at me at GameFaceLee. Hashtag it up on the Baseline. For the Baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw. We appreciate you guys, and until next time, we out.